We are starting back with Matthew 26. We got all the way through 25. Yes. Yeah. All right. So we are out of the apocalypse. And Vince, last week at the end of class, you didn't think we were quite done with 24. Did you want to bring?
No. I missed you.
No, I just wanted to make sure that we didn't leave anything.
No.
Okay. All right.
I just realized you cut.
Okay. All right. Good. So, all right. So we're at 26. And 26, we're getting back to the narrative. Like, we have this picture of kind of the end times, but it's also this now not yet times. And it's also directly related to the crucifixion of Jesus. It's all this scary stuff that is pointing us to the crucifixion of Jesus and his death and resurrection. So that's it's important that we look at all the scary stuff that's in Matthew. And also, just a quick aside, when we think about all the scary stuff in Revelation too, and all that stuff, I think our first inkling should be to look at the crucifixion of Jesus. The kind of a thing to go through that first before we look at it any other way. And I think that's a good plot point to drive ourselves into. So, all right. So chapter 26. Is this a super long one? Ooh, it is.
Range fairly quick.
Let's get up to the garden. Let's go to verse 35.
Say it is familiar.
Yeah, it is familiar. Let's read up to the garden rather than reading the whole thing. Or should we read the whole thing? You guys read the whole thing. All right. So George, what we do is we listen to the Bible being read. Oh, and I need to bring that up. I haven't brought it up.
Now it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, that he said to his disciples,
"You know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified."
Then the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders of the people assembled at the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and plotted to take Jesus by trickery and kill him.
Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people.
And when Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him having an alabaster flask of very costly fragrant oil, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table. But when his disciples saw it, they were indignant.
"Why this waste? For this fragrant oil might have been sold for much and given to the poor."
But when Jesus was aware of it, he said to them,
"Why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, but me you do not have always. For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my burial. Assuredly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her."
Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests.
"What are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you?"
And they counted out to him 30 pieces of silver. So from that time he sought opportunity to betray him. Now on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples came to Jesus.
"Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?"
"Go into this city to a certain man, and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'"
So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When evening had come, he sat down with the 12. Now, as they were eating, he said,
"Assuredly, I say to you, one of you will betray me."
And they were exceedingly sorrowful. And each of them began to say to him,
"Lord, is it I?"
Lord, is it I?
"He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me." The Son of Man indeed goes just as it is written of him. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born.
Then Judas, who was betraying him, answered,
Rabbi, is it I?
You have said it.
And as they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to the disciples.
Take. Eat. This is my body.
Then he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them.
Drink from it, all of you. For this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on, until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom.
And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives.
All of you will be made to stumble because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have been raised, I will go before you to Galilee.
Peter answered,
Even if all are made to stumble because of you, I will never be made to stumble.
Assuredly, I say to you that this night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times.
Even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you.
and so said all the disciples. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane.
Sit here while I go and pray over there.
And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed.
My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me.
He went a little farther and fell on his face.
Oh, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will.
Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter,
What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Again, a second time, he went away and prayed,
Oh, my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done.
And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So he left them, went away again, and prayed the 3rd time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said to them,
Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand.
And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given them a sign.
Whomever I kiss, he is the one. Seize him.
Immediately he went up to Jesus
Greetings, Rabbi.
and kissed him.
Friend, why have you come?
Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And suddenly, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear.
Put your sword in its place. For all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? How then could the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must happen thus?
In that hour, Jesus said to the multitudes,
Have you come out as against a robber, with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you, teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me. But all this was done, that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled.
Then all the disciples forsook him and fled, and those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, and he went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at last 2 false witnesses came forward.
This fellow said, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days.
And the high priest arose and said to him,
Do you answer nothing? What is it these men testify against you?
But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him,
I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God.
It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the power and coming on the clouds of heaven.
Then the high priest tore his clothes.
He has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have of witnesses? Look, now you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think?
He is deserving of death.
Then they spat in his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands.
Prophesy to us, Christ. Who is the one who struck you?
Now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him.
You also were with Jesus of Galilee.
But he denied it before them all.
I do not know what you are saying.
And when he had gone out to the gateway, another girl saw him, and said to those who were there,
This fellow also was with Jesus of Nazareth.
But again he denied with an oath.
I do not know the man.
And a little later those who stood by came up and said to Peter,
Surely you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you.
Then he began to curse and swear.
I do not know the man.
And Peter remembered the word of Jesus.
Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times.
So he went out and wept bitterly.
Okay. All right. So I doubt we'll get through this whole book, this whole chapter, I mean. But let's try to kind of focus towards the beginning of the chapter a little bit with our comments. But what stood out to you? What stood out to you? Anything?
Is the story of the woman with the oil the same one that we see in John? Because there's differences, and I don't.
Yeah. So I would say yes. I would say yes.
It seems like it.
I think they're performing. I'm trying to remember all the details of John 1 right now. I think they're performing some different functions in the story. But
Well, in John, it says that he's with Lazarus. And,
yeah.
And I think he says Mary breaks the jar of oil. But here it doesn't say it's Mary, it says it's a woman.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if it's even the same meal. Did it happen twice? I don't remember the story of John that well. I just remember it from John.
See, John is really. So John is very, very Jewish, and the way he writes is that way. And what I mean by that is that it's Jewish, and just that part of the world during this time wrote in this cyclical style that they'll move forward a little bit, and they'll tell the story, and then they'll kind of go back. And as they're progressing in the story, they keep going back. Lazarus's resurrection, when Jesus calls Lazarus from the grave, is that with Jesus' resurrection? Like they are, like Jesus' resurrection is a culmination and further telling of that Lazarus story as it goes forward. So with that happening around Lazarus I think there's all of this collective memory that we all have of reading the story going, oh, like this all sounds like Jesus' death and resurrection and all that. And we also see how, when Lazarus came back, that the chief priests and the Pharisees and all that stuff, they didn't like that either. Like that. That's, and so you can see all this stuff. So I think it's kind of rhyming with all this, and that brings us up to a good question, a good statement, and something that I'm a big fan of, and you guys have heard me say this before. I'm a big fan of what is going on in the book here, like over there. I grew up in college. They were really trying to trying to find. There's this goal out there of trying to find the historical Jesus, is what it's called. And it's like, and they're trying to peel away. It's like, who was Jesus really? So they're trying to look for clues in the Gospels. Like, let's find the real story and all that stuff. I personally, I've grown tired of that. And this is just me. This is just me. Vance and I have had a few discussions about all this, and I've talked about it in this class for a long time. I try to make it a goal to kind of stick to what is going on here. It's good to know what's going on in those other Gospels and to see how those are doing. But Matthew is writing a version of the story, and that he wants us to see. That is what he is doing, and so that's important for us to see. And so is it the same lady? It's probably the same story. And I think those stories definitely rhyme, and they're just being used in different things. And I wouldn't let that bother you. But could it be two different stories? Sure.
It could. Sure. I just was curious because he doesn't name Mary here, but Mary gets named in the other version. So
yeah. Here, one second. My laptop is old.
Charge it up. This is why we don't use one at my stay. My battery dies, and my computer dies too. I'm sorry I brought that up. It's just the other version of the story names Mary, and this one didn't. I remember it as being Mary, and I was surprised it didn't say Mary here.
Each of them tells the story the way they remember it.
Yeah.
The way they want you to hear it.
Exactly.
It's exactly like when I wrote my book on the fire department. It's what I want you to know. I don't care what anybody else does. I just want you to know the good parts.
Yeah, like that's, and that's, and that is something. So this is a bigger culture thing that I think it's for having cultural intelligence is important for us to realize, because there is this idea that we always want to get to the truth, and people will often say like, well, this is the truth type of thing like that. But the thing is you can take, you're a lawyer, you know about this all too well. You can take true events and present true events in a certain way that's telling a false story.
Thank you.
Right? Like, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. Like that's, well, and that's because you had to always weed through that. You know?
Like the question is, how do you want it to end?
Yeah.
What I'm saying.
And so we have this thing of the truth, and it seems noble and all of those things, but I really interpret things now through a lens of like, well, what is the point of what happened? You know, like what's all that? And our searching for the truth, we can actually find something that's completely opposite to what actually happened. We're still using all the true events. This happens to us in life all the time. That's why I talk to the lawyer. This is his life. He picks through all of that stuff. I'm throwing bouquets at you, but like to use his language.
Yes.
But that's what happens, right? And so you know, as we look at these things, we're like, okay, what's the story being told here? And I think we get to the bigger nugget of what the truth is. Then, and so something that stood out to me was verse 2. You know, he finished saying all these things. And remember what I've been talking about, like all this is about the cross. And look at what Jesus says right away in chapter 26, verse 2. He's like, you know, after 2 days of the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified. You know, after he said all these things, even Matthew is, because we often don't listen to him. We don't listen to him, but he grabs us by our ears. I know it's a famous family story in my family. My dad just he would get diagnosed as having ADHD and all that stuff. And my grandmother would always talk about how she had to grab him by his ears and pull him in close and go, "Do you understand what I've told you to do?" Like all that stuff, like that. That's you know, like over there. And I think this verses 1 and 2 is Matthew grabbing us by the ears and going, "Do you understand what we're writing about here?" Like it's such a temptation to look at the apocalypse stuff of chapter 24 and 25 and go, this is about everything else. And Matthew's like, no. Like that's, do you realize what this is about? And that this is about the cross of Jesus, that the apocalypse is going to happen, but it's the first and foremost apocalypse happens with Jesus on the cross.
That might have happened a long time before, because you're talking about 3 years worth of his ministry or so, a little bit better.
Yeah.
We're reading it like it's right now.
Yeah. We're talking, and I
kind of pushes it all together.
And I really think he's talking. So I think he's talking about, and going back, you know, I think he's talking about like the cross is the apocalypse, but also you see cross rhyming events that happen throughout time, and we even have some of those in our own lives. You know, that's when Paul, I think, is talking about taking up crosses and things like that. So that's I just think it's there, and then we immediately see that they that this chief priest, they want to kill him, and plotted to take Jesus by trickery and kill him. What's the language that the other translations use there? That's verse 4.
And they plotted to arrest him by some sly way.
By some sly way?
By stealth.
By stealth. Okay. Trickery seemed like a very New King Jamesy language. And so like that's I like the word trickery. Like I like that. But like the sly or stealth. Yeah, like that's but it's interesting when you look at verse 5, they want to do it covertly, but they want to keep it low, and the reason why is they don't want to riot. Yeah, they don't want to riot. They don't want to riot, which is interesting. Which is interesting, and the Gospels do an interesting job here. The Gospels, and we're going to see this as we're going through there. They thread a line through them that is amazingly crafty. And especially the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But we really see it in Matthew and Mark. They put a line through here of the people, of the nameless people being for Jesus, right? And yet there's a switch. And the switch, I think, coincides that the people and the disciples are similar. Like the disciples are meant to kind of be like the voice of the people type of thing, and that when they abandoned Jesus, and when Peter, which we get to at the end of our chapter today, like that's kind of a sign of the people abandoning him too. And I know I'm fast forwarding because I'm an idiot, but I thought it was interesting in the interrogation that they couldn't get anyone to come up and say anything against Jesus. You know, like that's, and I think that's kind of part of what we're talking about, this through line of where Jesus is abandoned by everyone. But right now, he's not at this point in the chapter.
Is this not by Caiaphas, tacit understanding that Christ is Christ? This is an echo when Jesus is in the temple, and they want to mess around with him because people are outside and tear the place apart. And we have the same thing going on. The authorities are fearful.
Yes. I think that's a lot. That they're let's see, how do we put it in the other gospel? That they are, oh man, what was the word we used to use, Ed?
Where are you looking?
When we were in Mark, that they were feckless. They're feckless leaders. Like that's how I describe them. That's what. But that's kind of them too. They're just like, yeah, you're like, eh. Like they're words. It's all kind of politics too.
Yeah, but then why does it say there were many false witnesses, but they couldn't find a false witness?
I think it's that. This is how I understand it, and then, like this is just a Chris Escher thing. But I think it's that through line that we're starting to get, like that through line that's following the disciples, because remember it's all around the same time as the betrayal of Peter, and that I think you're seeing the people pick up and betray Jesus as well, like this as we get to Jesus on the cross, where he's saving mankind, and so like I think there's some of that. So that anointing at Bethany. So we get from the religious leaders being feckless, or I don't know if there's a word that you would want to use, Nick, but these religious leaders, and then all of a sudden we are encountered with this woman who anoints him. And why does Jesus say that she's anointed?
Preparing him for burial.
Preparing him for burial. And I think this is also Matthew grabbing us by the ears again and going, don't lose sight of what's important. Like we are going straight to the cross.
And as far as what Vance was saying, I think it is the same anointing.
Yeah.
Because in John it says it was 6 days before the
Passover.
Yeah, you gotta remember John is like, most of that book is within days of the crucifixion.
I mean, he's very, very, very.
Yeah.
This is exactly when it was.
Yeah, this is interesting because in this chronology here, it talks about Jesus returns to Bethany to visit Mary and Martha.
Yeah.
And that it makes the reference to John, but it's sitting here right next to this story, which is, so I just got
You just left Lazarus out of it, that's all.
Yeah, well, Lazarus isn't part of the story.
He's
They
not.
could be related, maybe?
Well, they are. Mary and Martha are Lazarus' sisters.
Yeah, I know, but I mean the leper.
Oh, I don't know. And
That Simon the leper maybe had been some relative.
Oh, maybe.
And they were close friends and they used that house. Or,
Yeah.
it could be the same place, but it doesn't really.
it doesn't say, it really doesn't matter. I just saw it here and then I read this and I wondered, are they the same?
So, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I haven't come up with a synonym, but I don't think feckless is appropriate. These folks are calculating. They know what they want to do. They know how to accomplish it. Feckless is, I don't care about anything, but these guys,
Yeah.
they know what they're
Pretty
doing.
serious.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're treacherous.
Treacherous. Ooh.
Jesus.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good one. It's, no, it is. It is. So, verse 6, when Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper,
Right.
what is that communicating? Like, what is that communicating? What do you think?
I mean, well, we don't know that the Simon the leper is the leper that he cleansed that came, the one that came back.
Yeah, I just looked at the cross reference.
But
That's chapter 8, verse 2. Future. Yeah.
But I'm assuming that the leper is someone that nobody would associate with, and he went there.
I think that's kind of what's going on. Is that we're immediately brought into like a place of lowliness, like with the leper there, and then the woman in this position of loneliness, and then all of a sudden this woman breaks open, 60 grand or something like that. They didn't say how much it's worth, but John does, but like it would have been worth a lot, like that. That's
300 pounds or something.
yeah. Yeah. And so it would be the equivalent of like 40 grand, 60 grand. Kind of depends. It's like a year's wages. And so like
It would
that's
have been bad enough if a man did it, but it's a woman.
yeah.
And we know how marginalized women are in this
Yeah.
particular epoch.
Yeah. So it's not one of the boys. It's not one of Jesus' normal crew of the 12, but it's this lady, and who is, and as we're getting deeper into the story, unnamed.
Mhm.
She's unnamed, which I think is even more. So it's this, the way Matthew is presenting it. You have this leper's house and this unnamed woman, which is interesting. It's doing this thing which would be considered wasteful. Like it's one of these things where I don't know. There's not even a good analog for it. But it's just you just want to give a ton of money to somebody, and it's just like, why did you do that? Like that's just a waste, like that we could have done, or like maybe we could do it like this, like if we do a raging party and we just we pay for like people enjoy the parties that we do here, and all that stuff, and everyone has fun. And I think some of that is because we're financially responsible when we do it, and all that stuff. But if we are doing like prime choice cuts of meat, we buy like a special oven to cook all that just for that one event. I have a feeling people would come up to us afterwards and be like, like, you spent 60 grand on this. Now you're like this place is fine. Like
Finally, it happened.
But I think something like that. I think you might hear someone's like, why were we so frivolous? We could have given this to someone else. And that's not a direct analog, but I think something like that, and you can understand why they're saying that. It's like, why? Like that's expensive. That's just Jesus. Like, why? And it's, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, are they thinking about the future too? That they're in Jerusalem, and maybe they think they're going to use that for when they anoint him as king. Like that's when he finally ascends to the throne. I don't know. It doesn't say that. I'm just going like, because they and what I'm saying there, George. I realize I said something that's very Bible study-ish there, like this Bible study, but it's my understanding the disciples, as they get closer to Jerusalem, they think that Jesus is the Messiah, that he is the Christ, he's the King, and as he gets closer to Jerusalem, and it is Jerusalem, they think he's going to be risen up and he's going to kick all the baddies of Rome out of Jerusalem. He's going to kick Herod off the throne. He's going to stand up there. And and they're watching this woman like use this beforehand, like that's.
This is where feckless is useful. They are feckless.
They're feckless.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about the bread.
It's about the bread. yeah, Dolores.
Where would a woman being so low in the ladder be able to have all this money for all this expensive stuff? Where'd she get it? Was she a baddie and?
No, it was probably from like it was probably family money. Like Jesus was basically bankrolled by wealthy women, like that were following around, and that maybe they were wealthy widows, something like that. So women would have had lower standings, but if they were kind of independently wealthy, they would be able to afford things like this. But it also could have been maybe it was like an heirloom or something like that maybe it was meant to be used. Like there's multiple ways that she could have gotten it. Maybe it was meant to be used for like a father or something like that, and something happened to him where they weren't able to anoint his body.
Yeah. Okay.
Like that's, I don't know. That's a good question. It's a good question. But it is odd that she has it. Like, and I think you're picking up on some oddness there. Yeah. Like that. That's exactly. And the disciples are like, what in the world? And it's interesting what Jesus says. And again, it's like Matthew grabbing her ears. He's like, this is about the cross, guys. That's what it is. And as Jesus says, like she's doing it for my burial. Like that's, I don't know, how does that hit you guys? That whole, like this verse like 10 through 13. The verse 11 often gets mistranslated or misapplied. It's like the poor you'll always have with you.
It's the 13 that's confusing.
Yeah.
She's going to be remembered.
What do you think that?
That's why I'm saying I have no idea. I mean, she's just an unnamed woman, and they're supposed to remember her now.
Yeah.
What's Matthew thinking of?
I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts?
I don't think he's specifically saying we're going to remember her by name, but remember her activity. I know he says he told in memory of her, but I think he's saying in memory of what she has done.
Yeah, her deed.
Her deed.
And looking at John, it's the same thing. It says Mary there.
Yeah, it's Mary.
Yeah, if it's
John gets very specific.
Yeah.
But no.
I think it's. I mean, we're reading it now and remembering it.
Well, it's here. It's recorded in 3 other gospels.
And I think it's a sign that the gospel writers, especially Matthew in this case, is bringing. It's like, hey, this is important. Like we're seeing, like to kind of go off on what Dolores said, we're seeing this woman who's not part of the 12, like all that stuff. She's definitely following Jesus. She's definitely around Jesus a lot. They know who she is, and all that. She has this thing of great value, and all of that stuff. And then all of a sudden she wastes it. You know, like that. That's over there. And you know, is there a little bit of a commentary on the wastefulness of like God's grace of Jesus dying on the cross? You know, is there a little bit of a commentary there? I'm sitting there thinking out loud. Mm-hmm. And so is there the God's grace? You know, we're talking about anointing him for death, and that God's grace is being wasted out on everyone there, and that this story is a reminder of that. It'll be told forever. I don't have the definitive answer on that. That's kind of where I don't know if that's good or not.
The use of the word waste and Jesus in the same sentence is problematic. It's not a waste.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what Jesus is saying about that.
Mm-hmm.
Is about that all that money for that for him being.
But it's the disciples that are saying it's a waste.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, feckless.
Yeah. So like that's.
Why do we show the money? I mean, that woman has the money for what? For the trial? For the thesis? That's what we're showing.
I think they probably just had like some things that they were traveling around with, and so it was probably just kind of all in their kitty, but maybe it's what she brought that she was, you know, as she started following Jesus, she brings this ointment, or she may not even have had it, and it was just part of all of their stuff that they kind of traveled around with in their band. They would have a little jar with this very expensive perfume in it.
It is Mary. Mary and Martha live in Bethany. They're from
Yeah,
that
area.
They're from that area.
So it could be from their own house.
Just picked it up at home.
Yeah.
Brought it.
If it was in the kitty, then wouldn't Judas be in charge of it, and he wouldn't have wrote a letter?
Yeah, that's true. So if they are in Bethany, and it's like Matthew's very presenting it like it shows up, just like, oh, look at this. You know, we don't get a ton of backstory about where it is. So it could be coming from someone's house. It could be coming from something, but it's obscenely extravagant. Mm-hmm. You know, again, we go back to the big picnic thing, and even if I said Mick donated $60,000 for us all to have these nice steaks and lobster tails, whatever nice thing that you're
fine wines.
I mean, fine wines, and that's awfully nice of me. Yeah, it's awfully nice. But like, wouldn't that be better suited to like?
What happened to the pulled pork?
Yeah. This is what people would be asking for. That pulled pork's cheap stuff. Like that. But it's but that is, you know, I think people would say like, yeah, could we not use this a little better? And that's, we're getting in there, but like it goes back. It's like, no, this is for my burial. It brings us back to the bottom of the cross, like in a very visceral way. Okay.
Just like a woman to be remembered, so would I.
Yeah. so
Absolutely.
Maybe.
In your dreams.
Chris.
Yeah, Chris. That could be closer than you think. That could be closer than you think. So then one of the 12, like, so we go with Judas, like, so John, I know we're bringing up John, but I think there's some distinctions here in how these two are written. John has Judas complaining right away, like over there. But you can kind of read through the lines as, why has Judas done this? You know, that's kind of an interesting way of looking at it. I mean, would you guys agree with that viewpoint? Like, I don't know. I'm spitballing.
Why has Judas done what?
Why is he going to the chief priest?
Oh, the money.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like, but it's straight off of this waste.
Yeah.
On Jesus. Yeah.
Could have prompted it.
Yeah, like this. I don't know. But is there some prompting maybe that's happening? And, then one of the 12, Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest and said, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you?
Well, it's also the reference up here that he says that, in 2 days it will be handed over to be crucified. And if you want to believe that Judas is a little bit greedy, he wanted the guy that did it if he could get money, because he goes and he asks, what will you give me if I hand it over?
So you're saying Judas is shrewd here.
Well, I'm saying there's a lot of things. That might be one of them. That's an interesting take. That's an interesting take. He's like listening to Jesus. He's like, well, if he wants it. It's an interesting take.
Yeah.
Like that's.
Every now and then I have these weird thoughts. They don't really hold up.
No, I like that. I like that. That's an interesting take. I don't know if I'm there yet. I like that. It's weird.
Yeah, this one
I
says,
like it.
This one says Judas betrays Jesus because Jesus defends the woman and makes himself more important than the poor.
Mm-hmm. That's what the setting up said? That's interesting.
The LCA Bible.
Yeah. That's interesting as well. That's good. Like so that. Well, and that's which is the gospel that's like he cared nothing for the poor. Was that John? It's like, and he would help himself to it every now and then.
John.
Yeah.
That's a John.
It's such a
whether it is or isn't.
Yeah. Like
Sounds
that's John. But that's an interesting view of that. It's almost like Judas isn't happy with how everything is going. So if we go back to my through line analogy again, you're seeing that through line begin where all the people are with them and things are cracking now. And you're starting to see the cracks go all the way up till the cry for brass, So that's interesting.
To fulfill the prophecies, this has got to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Jesus makes that point. Yeah. He has to do it.
Yeah, and Jesus is resolute this whole time. He no one's having to hold his ears and go, this is what's happening. And it's amazing the resoluteness going on past all this in the early garden. There's
the chief priests and the Pharisees absolutely know who Jesus is.
Yeah.
So why do they need someone to betray him?
Yeah.
Only to fulfill the prophecy.
Okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
and that's what he says later on. It's like, was I not with you the whole time, teaching, and all these things? Like, why did you need to do this with clubs and all that? Yeah, that's interesting. All right, the Last Supper. So language that's being used right before this Last Supper, I think is key to this. Is that you have all this Passover language that is being used, in all of this stuff, all this Passover language, and so now you get the Passover meal, the Last Supper. So, and what I think is important about that is, the Exodus is the time that God saved his people. And the fact that all of this with Jesus' death and resurrection is being directly connected to the time when God saved his people and the Exodus is very, very key, to seeing how all this stuff acts. And so, what stood out to you about the Last Supper there?
Story we hear a lot.
Yeah.
The nameless man goes see a certain man.
The nameless man. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so they go prepare, go to the city. there'll be a certain man. What you don't know, Ed, is that's his name. People know him as Dr. Man, but his name is certain.
A little known fact.
So after your sermon?
Why isn't it capitalized?
Disagreements. Like the scholars. But no, like again, so we have kind of the faceless woman, and then we have this like faceless man that's kind of setting all this stuff up. Let's see here.
The celebrity, you're making my eyes water.
So what else kind of stands out to you like that I was kind of just going over. The problem is we're so used to this story that we're so used to the oddities in it that it doesn't stick out to us. We're gonna have to hit. We're at 11:58 right now. We're gonna stop here soon.
But so we're just ripping through this book.
Yeah, we're just ripping through. I knew we were gonna crawl through this because this, like that, I just knew we were gonna crawl through this last days stuff. Like it's so thick. It's so thick, and everything the book has been leading up to is all paying off in these last few chapters. Like there's so much stuff. So is there anything that stands out to you that you've always kind of read as like the certain man thing? Like I was just reading over that. Like, but I think that's a good point. It's just Dr. Mann there. Like that's.
His first name was Charlie.
Charlie.
Certain now.
Let's see here. So the disciples did of Jesus, and they prepared the Passover. And then verse 20, when evening had come, he sat down with the 12. Now as they were eating, he said, "Surely I say to you, one of you will betray me." So this probably after, for those of you who were part of our Passover meal, what was that, two Easters ago now? Something like that. It was probably after they did all the ceremony and they're all sitting around talking, maybe, a little bit too deeper into wine than they normally are. And then Jesus is like, what?
12 glasses of wine.
Yeah. One of you is going to betray me. And like, excuse me, what? And I think that we see that through line that this is happening, and that is the point of the cross, I would say, is that through line of the abandonment of Jesus on the cross is kind of the point. And I think that's where the hope.
How did he know they would betray?
How does he know?
How did he know it?
I think there's two different ways. He probably knows what Judas is up to, like that. But also I think you have prophet like Jesus that he kind of knows what's going on.
He knows the scriptures from the
Old Testament.
The Old Testament.
Yeah, and then he would need to be
which
betrayed.
is called the Bible.
Which is called Holy Scriptures. So I think there's two different ways.
He had studied all the prophecies in his youth, and so he knew that was going to happen.
He was a money reader.
And I think he just kind of knows too.
Yeah, and God could have told him that.
Mm-hmm. I think he knows, and and they all start saying, "Lord, is it I?"
Mm-hmm.
And then he basically tells.
And then even Judas. Notice it's him.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll just be a sheep here and say,
"Oh, is it I?" Yeah. As he's clanking, as he's walking, maybe that's how Jesus knows. He can hear the 30 pieces. Like when your little money bag's a little heavier than like that's. You plan on giving that to the poor, Judas? And
I guess you got the money first.
Yeah. And so and so but then he like reveals it, and this will be the last thing we talk about. But yeah, he answered. He dips his hand with me in the dish with his betraying me. The Son of Man indeed goes just as it was written of him, and that's what Ed keeps pointing to. But woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be, it would have been good for that man if he had not been born. And Judas, who was betraying, answered him, Rabbi, is it I? And he said, you have said it. So,
the second time, perhaps more time, but in response to a question, I think it was the Pharisees who were challenging him, or a priest in the temple, are you the son of? And he said, you said it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why do you think he's doing that? That's it. I've noticed that too. Why do you think he's doing that? You don't want to say anything. Like so. Like it's Jesus is often kind of sneaky, and I was getting at. Like, and I think that's part of it. Is Jesus? I know we need to be done, but I kind of want to get through this last little thought. Is Jesus, when he's like the Son of Man, just as it's written, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born. Is that just about Judas?
Well, it doesn't have to be.
Doesn't have to be.
About all of us, if we betray Jesus, if we turn our back on him.
Well, and so my deflected through line is I do think that becomes all of us. And that, what is impossible for man becomes possible for God. And that Jesus comes back alive, defeats all of our sin and raises us up again. Like, and that's when I read that, I kind of think we pointed at Judas, but like I think we all exist in this in some way, but we're quickly. It's going to be like 10 weeks from this class, but we're quickly getting to the resurrection and all of those things. So I think that's so, and maybe Judas is like, do we read this story and at some point, whether it be maybe Judas, maybe if we understand ourselves through Peter, maybe we understand ourselves through someone else, do we end up saying, is it I? And
I don't know the man.
Yeah, or I don't know the man. Like that's, do we all end up kind of saying that? And we see that Jesus, like, even though the consequence of all of that is Jesus' death, as we see we're moving towards that, and all these things are bringing us to this things. But Jesus, by Jesus' death, we see that he, like, to quote the Apostles' Creed, literally grabs us out of the clutches of hell, right, and pulls us out. And so, like that's what's going on there. So, I think that's good for today. I think that's good for today. Any other thoughts or anything like that to close on? No? All right. Well, everyone that's watching on YouTube when this is recorded and all that stuff, thank you so much for joining us.